Hi everyone. I'm very glad to be here to see so many amazing women today at this conference. I'm an investor at UVC Partners, and I will tell you how to fundraise your startup. Before I talk about this, I will briefly introduce UVC. So we are an early stage investor. We invest from pre-seed to Series A. Initial tickets, so initial investments are between 500,000 to 10 million. And we always then continue also being your partner on the long term and investing in further fundraising rounds as well. We're a B2B investor with a focus of industrial tech, energy, topics like energy, quantum computers, mobility, as well as classic enterprise SaaS businesses. ESG also is a very important topic, so we have an ESG score as well before we invest into different startups. We evaluate the companies as well. And here you see some of the companies we have invested in. Some of them might ring a bell. Flixbus, for example, we were one of the first investors there. Other companies are, for example, Twice. They do battery analytics, stable in the energy segment, and many more. At UVC, I look at hardware-related topics, specifically also energy-focused. But before speaking more about me, what interests me is actually you. So, are there any founders here in this room? Some small hands raising, very good. Are there any people thinking about raising a startup or interested in startups? Some more hands here as well. For those who have already a startup, have you raised funds as well? Great. Yeah, perfect. So what I would like to ask first is, why do you think is fundraising important? Why is it actually a topic to discuss? Yes, it's hard to grow your business without it. It's hard to scale. What else?
Well, I also feel like it's a kind of way to validate your business model, to kind of see if someone else, except for you, believes in it, sees potential.
Yes, a way to validate your business model, to see if others see potential. Very true. Any more ideas?
This is the basis of winning business. You don't do business if you don't have the capital. That's the basics.
Yes, the basis of any business. Well, I think there are many reasons, and I think sometimes it's also a little bit underestimated what it actually means and what impact it has. I believe that one of the very important topics is because capital actually will help you to build the best team and the best product. If you have money, you can hire great people, you can focus, you can iterate on your product more and more because you have just more resources, right? If you don't have that, there are many examples also of companies that are very successful, that have bootstrapped, so that didn't raise really funds. But it's a lot harder, and it will be faster and easier and potentially also more successful if you actually have money to fundraise and to support the growth of your startup. Second, if you have competitors that do something in a very similar space and they do have funding, they hire a larger team and so on, they can aggressively enter the market, they can spend money on marketing, well, and you do something very similar, it might be hard to compete. So it's also a way to get ahead of your competition and secure your position. And last but not least, an investor is also for you a sparring partner, right? Like, is someone that sees so many companies, sees so many different business models over the years, not only initially what the startups pitch, but also how these companies performed and how they actually became successful companies and what didn't work out through the years. And you don't need to necessarily have an investor to have someone like that, but an advisor, a partner, a mentor that will actually support you along the way. And if the person has skin in the game, you probably have maybe more interactions and also support than if not. So an investor, when looking for an investor, don't just go for the money, but go for what people call smart money. So someone that you connect with, also because you will never get rid of the investor anymore, right? It's not like a marriage where in many countries, if you don't get along, you can just get divorced and you move on. But with an investor, it will just not work this way. So once you have that person inside your company, you will have to be working with them for a very long time. And most companies that we see, they don't sell after 2-3 years. It's a very long-term journey. So be very sure who you actually take on board, and then that person actually provides value and brings you forward and not only challenges you in a negative way, but in a positive way. Right, so what are the different ways of fundraising? I mean, I'm a venture capital investor, so that's one way, but there are many other ways as well. So I would like to ask you, what do you think are the different ways to fundraise? Grants, yes? Networking? Yes, that's very important as well.
And also loans?
Loans, yes? Yes, equity funding, loans. Crowdfunding. Well, soon I can leave because you already know everything. True, so I've missed that slide, but the question is where to start. And the first important way of how to raise your funds, you can put your own money if you have. You can do what we call friends and family round. I think that's sometimes a little bit unfair because it's a bit more reserved to those who actually come from families who can actually support. But it's also a very prominent way to start and kick off your startup, to invest yourself. It's also seen as a positive sign by investors if you actually put some of your money yourself, but it's not necessarily required. And as I mentioned, it narrows the group of people who can actually do that. But there are other ways as well. You can bootstrap your startup. Meaning, of course, in the beginning, you still have to build your product and you maybe sit in your living room or in your garage or wherever doing that and finance yourself with first revenues from customers. So have contracts from customers that will actually help you financing and building the growth of your company. There are also angel investors. I think amongst women, unfortunately, there are not so many, but hopefully there will be more women as well investing into startups. Angel investors are mostly either successful entrepreneurs who have made the same journey and made all of these learnings and now want to support other entrepreneurs as well. Or often like wealthy individuals who maybe have a specific focus or understand also the need of supporting people in a specific area. Also with angels, I recommend to have someone that will actually drive value and also knows your field. Other ways are, for example, bank loans, crowdfunding. There are also accelerator programs that don't necessarily give you money, but they might give you resources, network, support, media kits. There are all sorts of different kinds of accelerators, incubators as well. And of course, there is VC funding. So before I forget about the next slide, I will take a look what is there. So I would like to explain to you the venture capital model, because if you're planning to raise VC money, you need to understand how it works and how the VC actually thinks. So as UVC partners, we have a 250 million euro fund, but let's take as an example a 100 million euro fund. Because as a matter of fact, fundraising is not that complicated, but there is a process and there are rules and you just need to know about them, and then it will be a lot easier. So if we have a fund that has 100 million of capital, so that actually means that in our case, our investors give us money. So they're wealthy individuals, they're corporates, they're institutional investors. They give us the money, so we actually invest it into the startups. That means we also have an obligation to give them their money back, and ideally a good return on the money as well, because it's a very risky field of investment. So if we have a fund with 100 million, and we say, okay, we invest that into 10 different startups, at the end of the journey, when we exit the company, so when the company gets sold, we assume that we still have 10% left in equity in the company. And experience also shows that out of these 10 companies we invested in, one will be an outlier, which doesn't mean that 9 of them died, but 9 of them are either not existing or not that successful. So this one company that we find amongst these 10 has to actually bring all of the return for the fund. So if we do an example and we sell this company for 200 million euro, which sounds like a lot of money, and we have 10% of shares, that means we will get 20 million as a return on investment. In our whole fund, we had 100 million. So that's a very bad business case because we have lost 80 million in money. If we take another example and we actually sell it for 1 billion, right, and we have 10%, it means we will get 100 million as return. And then the fund has kind of not made any money, but not lost any money. So that's better, but it's still not very great. So what is our goal? Our goal is to build a unicorn and to have a company that sells for a lot more money. So in this case, for example, 4 billion euros, which at the end brings us an investment that we can then return on invest to our investors, so which we can return. So that maybe sounds super scary, and I think also, especially women, they are sometimes a bit more thinking, oh wow, this is too big and I cannot do that. But building a unicorn is difficult for everyone, no matter if it's a man or a woman. And at the beginning of the journey, no one will actually know how the company is going to be, right? We're all looking into this misty future, and you just need to be confident. You need to look at many different factors that I will explain in a little bit, but it's doable at least to do the initial part, and then later on also there are a lot of things that depend also on the market, if you're lucky, if you're there at the right time, and so on and so forth. So before I continue, if you have also any questions, you can ask me anytime, because I don't want this to be a monologue, so you feel free to ask. Otherwise, we can also ask at the end of this talk. So, as I said, it sounds maybe like a lot, but there are also a lot of rules on how to do fundraising, what is important for a company, for an investor. So I would like to ask you, what do you think what investors actually care about?
They care about the project's bankability.
The what?
The project's bankability.
Mm-hmm.
Perspective of the startup and the value of that.
Mm-hmm.
The team.
Yes, the team. You have to speak louder because I can. Impact for impact investors, yes. Actually, also for not impact investors, but it's less of an important factor, but it's still a factor that we definitely look at as well.
The demand of the product or service.
Yes, the demand of the product. Yes?
The risk.
Yes, a lot as well. And there are different kinds of risk. There is a risk of the technology being able to build, and there's a risk of the market. You know, often when we look at topics, it's maybe very early on, so we don't know how the market is going to develop. So there are also different factors of risk as well. Well, you've said a lot of great things, so I will start with the first one, which is product and technology. So building a first-class product, I think, is something that will make many investors convinced. And how do you actually do that, right? So the best way to build a product is along the needs of the customer. And I think people often have ideas of what they think that other people need, because you have maybe encountered yourself a specific need, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually the need of a very specific target group, as well as understanding who are actually the people who will be using the product. So building a very good product is not that easy, but I believe that it's something that, especially early on, is very, very important to focus on. So try to speak to your potential customers as much as you can. Try to understand them, show them ideas of your product, and then maybe iterate if you realize that actually they are interested in something different. And an investor will always as well look at your product, but never really be able to evaluate fully the value of the product. But what we do is actually, we go and then speak to your customers to see what they say. And we also introduce it to other people in our network who are part of the target group to understand what they say. So I think it's a very important factor in fundraising, but also even if you don't fundraise and you want to bootstrap your company, in just building something that has very good value. And of course, technology. We're a tech investor, deep tech investor, so that matters a lot. There are some startups that are less techy, but if you have defensibility, maybe patents or a specific technology that others, they do not have, and that secures your specific position, obviously that's very important. But the technology itself will not necessarily be able to, become the best company, because the product and the technology, they're not necessarily the same, right? But both of them are very important factors. Then the market. So we just already touched on the market. What does the market mean? So it's, for us, we look at the size of the market. Like, how big can the market be? Because the size of the market also limits how big your company can become. Most of the time, we don't assume that you will have a monopoly, because that oftentimes doesn't work out. So we think you will have a specific share of the market, a small share in many times. And for that, the market needs to be big enough. So there has to be enough people that you can address, or companies that you can address with your product, and also a specific amount of revenue you can make with your product in order to actually become a large company. And risk of market as well. Some markets, they're small initially. So for example, one topic I look at are quantum computers. We believe that this will be a very important field once they're publicly available, but we're still more in the beginning of this. So at the moment it's a small market, but it's a growing market, and this is also very interesting for an investor, because it will anyways take time until they have figured out everything. Then the competition. So generally having competition is a good point, right? Because if there is no competition and no one doing something in the similar field, it also means a bit that there is no market, because there will always be people who have had a similar idea in a similar field than you. And if that doesn't exist, it's not the very best sign. But the question is also, how much competition is there? Are there a lot of, are you going to build the next food delivery app in Berlin that delivers pizza to your place? Well, maybe that's a bit difficult, at least for us, to invest, because there are already very strong players in that market. But if there are other competitors and you can surely articulate why you have a different positioning and why you can actually win against these customers. And important is there also that just price is not a differentiator, because price can just end up in a price war, right? And we don't really see it as a proposition companies can really keep. Well, maybe there are some exceptions, but in general, it's you have to have a different proposition how you target your customers than just that. So how is the competition? And also be sure that investors, they will make their own research, right? Just not showing them the competitors or not telling them about it will come out, and it's also not the best way to do, because then we assume that you're hiding something. So just be proactive, show the ones that are there, and explain directly why your company is better or better approachable. Team was one of the points mentioned. So a very good team, what does it actually mean, right? So what we look at is that the team is complementary. So ideally diverse in terms of gender, but doesn't always happen, unfortunately. Hopefully more often in the future. But a team that actually might have worked together in the past, or that have complementary skills, that actually can bring the company forward and bringing different things to the table. But some people also assume, oh, we're a great team, we should be getting some money. Well, that happens in very rare cases, but most of the time you still need to have many of the other factors at least ticked. Business model. So how are you going to make money? Investors often like recurring revenues, so money that will come in every month. There are some companies that set up their business model differently, even though it would be possible to do a more recurring revenue model. And I think this is something that, investors like, but is not necessarily always important, and also really depends. Some companies, they have seasonal businesses, so they sell in winter but not in summer. Then obviously it's hard to have a model where companies make revenue all year round. But how does it work, and also how can it actually grow, and how is it scalable? Which brings us to financials. So how much money does it cost you to acquire a customer? Because there's always money involved in this, and time and marketing that you spend, and so on. And how much money does actually the company bring? And how scalable can then your business become? And last but not least, for us as investors as well, the exit. Exit means when the company gets sold at some point. And here I would like to state that I think sometimes people, they're afraid that their company will be taken away from them because the investor just wants to make money very fast and I don't know, triple the return and then get rid of the company. And there might be some investors that think like that, I don't know, but if you speak with serious investors, this is usually not the case, because the exit is often more driven by the founder than by us. We often see that to build a very large company, it takes quite some time. It takes 8 years, 10 years, so it's not really in our interest to sell beforehand, and it's often more the founder who actually wants to do maybe something different, their life has changed, and so on. So don't be intimidated, but also understand that the investor will need to evaluate who this company can actually be sold to at the end of the investment period. So now I've told you a lot of things about what is important for an investor, but how do you actually prepare your fundraising? So imagine now, some of you want to, or some of you want to in the future, raise funds for your company. What do you do? Make a strategy?
Market research
Market research about what?
about the product and your clients, what they needed.
And about the investors also. Yes? Networking in order to? Okay.
Well, build a nice pitch deck, of course.
Yes, a pitch deck. Not only nice, but also contentful. There was some hand there.
Fundraising for investment in energy efficiency and European energy. So we start with our strategy as mentioned, then we design our technical and financial proposal to be applied or to any donor agency or any international agency or local agency in Jordan in order to fundraising. And we develop cost sharing because we think that according to our experience that is attractive to national and international agencies to be as a cost sharing with so the amount or little bit from Jordan government. Maybe we have a project with the Canadian government, 10% from the government of Jordan and 90% from the government of Canadian. So it's well with cost sharing.
Thanks. Well, a lot of great things have been said, so I will wrap it up now on this. So first one, you do a list of investors. Who are actually the investors that you want to approach? There are a lot. You should do your research and you should actually approach those that are relevant for you. Sometimes we get pitch decks for some topics that we don't invest in at all, and it's not very good for you, but it's also not very good for the investor as well. And network, yes, because unfortunately it is also a business that works a lot based on networks, right? So you have to start networking with investors. They will be able to give you feedback, maybe tell you, okay, maybe you should do a bit more this, or this is important, or something else, to understand how they actually think about your business. But also, it is still a world that works a lot based on introductions as well. So network is very important. You need to understand your timeline, like when do you want to raise funding, how much time do you spend on this. I think good time is around maybe 3 months, 4 months. Don't pressure yourself too much. It takes a lot of time to identify all of these people, to talk to them, to present them your product, and so on. You build a storyline. It's not only about the product, but it's also about the overall story and the vision of what you actually want to achieve in the future and how you're going to get there. You make a pitch deck and ideally ask people to do introductions to VCs. That's why you should build a good network. You train your pitch. You can practice that with peers, with friends, with people who have raised money as well. And then, at the end, hopefully you will close the deal. And preparation is already half of the process, and it will help you a lot to actually get all the way to finish the fundraising and build your company. So what I would like to also tell you is we have launched female founder office hours. So if you're interested in learning more and connecting with other founders, asking more questions about how to fundraise, how to build a pitch deck, how to whatever it is, then you can sign up on these office hours. There are many different hours on building a product, on financing, on strategy. And I hope you will still have a great day today. I was very happy to meet you. And of course, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for this time and all of the great questions.